Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we're here to talk about soft and hard limits. So if you're wanting to know more about how to create hard and soft limits, what those look like for you, if you're new to the BDSM scene, or maybe you're not and you just want a different perspective on how to establish those in safe ways, how to communicate those to a partner, then stick around. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. So, hard and soft limits, especially when it comes to BDSM and kink play, are super important. I do want to say this is also incredibly important if you're in vanilla relationships. It's just not something that gets talked about in these ways. For the most part, we all have limits we can recognize. A lot of the times, the hard limits are much easier to recognize. And so let's talk a little bit about the difference. And this is more of my personal definition for how I work with these terms. Um, but but you can adopt them as your own or adjust them as suits you and serves you best. Just make sure that when you're discussing these with somebody else, that they have an understanding of what that means to you for both hard and soft limits. So for me, a hard limit is an absolute no. It is not something that I have any desire to ever explore, experience, or be a part of. And for me, when I first got into the scene, this was one of the few things when people started asking me what my limits were. I could recognize that there were a few things just right off the bat that I had absolutely zero interest in. One of those things for me being bestiality. I have no desire to bring actual animals into any sort of BDSM, kink, or sexual play whatsoever. Another thing was bringing in anything that involved actual children. So anybody under the age of 18, as it's defined by legal laws, I don't need to bring that into my realm or space when it involves BDSM, kink, or sexual play. Another one was fecal play. I had heard stories about a uh, from a prior partner about somebody they knew who had engaged in fecal play, and it was just one of those things where I was like, that's just not for me. And it doesn't have to be like, even though it's a hard limit, it doesn't have to be a like, that's the grossest thing ever, like a hard, like repulsive no. It can just it for me, hard limits are actually a very easy no. For me, the soft limits are what come in as this space where there's a level of resistance, um, a level of like, I'm not sure if that's something I'd want to explore. And it's something that if I'm potentially going to make a choice, if I explore it or not, I need more information on. And more information could be that it's talking with a partner about what they're wanting to experience in that space so I can gain a better understanding. It could mean that I actually need to see that sort of play in action. Um, I had one actually brought up recently, and it's just not something I have a big concept around as far as how that is actually applied or worked with in a scene, and it was stomping. And so again, I have not gone and explored this further to get a solid yes or no for my system of this is something I would want to play in. But the concept I have for it at this point is it's where the dominant or top partner is actually like stomping on you with their feet in different areas of your body. Um, and like it may be as simple as that. And when I go see it, because for me, seeing and it helps me get an understanding of like, could I see myself in that space of receiving that? And then I can make a more informed choice for myself. Is that something I might enjoy playing around with or not? And that soft limit is something that could end up being a hard limit. It could also be something I end up really enjoying. Again, it's something I need more information about. There, again, are many, many forms of information gathering that you can get. I don't necessarily recommend porn, even though that can give you somewhat an idea of the concept. I would really recommend doing more deep dive investigations into people who are providing education around these topics. So, I mean, there's educators, there's coaches, there's are people in the kink scene. If you actually go out to more public play spaces, kink events, dungeons, things of those sorts, like you can see all sorts of different play taking action and just kind of get a feel for, oh, is that something I would be interested or something I wouldn't? Uh, Great thing about the public play spaces, if they offer tastings or have, and tastings are usually offered by DOMs or tops who have been in the scene for a long period of time. I think most of the ones I know are a minimum of 10 years and have been vetted to say that they are a safe person to give these kind of demos in the spaces. Then you can check it out. You can have conversations with people about what this is like for them, what they enjoy about it, what they don't enjoy about it. Again, information gathering. So, like, if something is a soft limit for you, it doesn't mean like this is something you never touch. That is the hard limit. A soft limit is something that you need more information for. And even when you're in that experience, it may be more likely that you end up calling a scene or a play space and realizing it's really not for you. And guess what? That's perfectly okay. That is exactly what limits are there for. I was actually doing a little bit of research earlier just because I know my own personal experience with kind of discovering my limits and what that looked like. And I had all sorts of questions I came across in that process, but I was researching kind of like what exists in the world for where other people are running across issues with this. And I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me was a few different posts I came across where it was people who were submissives asking about their limits being used as punishments in their DS or BDSM dynamics. And this is something I want to really encourage people to steer away from. Your limits are a limit. It is a no until you like it is a no until you say it is a yes. And it is nobody's space or right or anything else to push you to have to play in that space. So first off, like you get to make the choice that you step away from that scene, that play, even if it's going to upset the other person. If another person is wanting to use your limits as punishments, that's not okay. It it ends up crossing that line between this is a consenting space into this is an abusive space. And where it becomes abusive in my book is that you now have one partner who is not consenting to that sort of play, to that sort of agreement. If you want to play with punishments, there are still plenty of ways to play with punishments where it can be something that is not a hard limit for the person or even a soft limit for the person and is something they don't enjoy. So let's say, I'm trying to think of an example. Actually, we'll just go back to when I was reading different posts and different comments people had placed down. One of the people had mentioned kneeling on rice as a punishment. And for me, the idea of kneeling on rice is not a soft limit or a hard limit. Does it sound uncomfortable and like something I would like be slightly annoyed at if I had to do it, that would feel like a punishment. Yes, definitely. It would not necessarily be something like I'd volunteer to do or be super excited to experience. And it's not something where I'm like, there's a huge repulsion and rejection in my system that, like, this is not okay. One way to really look at your limits as well, and it's different terminology, again, applied in different areas of life, and it's our boundaries. And one of the things I love that I have come across in boundaries and the boundary work I have done is that expressing my boundaries to another person can be very kind because it lets them know where I'm at, like the things that could cause damage to a relationship if they are like to be pushed for. Um, and it's also kind of this roadmap to tell another person, like, hey, this is how I receive care. Because if somebody continues to try to push up against one of my hard limits because it's just something they want, then that's not really showing care for me as a person. And to me, I identify as being incredibly demisexual, which for me, again, means that I need more of a connection. I need a good base of friendship so that there is some level of trust, safety, and care in that dynamic that I know exists to where the other person isn't just going to be caring about their pleasure, their own experience, but they're also going to care that I am enjoying that experience as well, whether that is BDSM, kink, or sexually related. Side note, just for the way I talk about these spaces, I do not consider that BDSM or kink activities have to involve anything sexually explicit. Through my experience through with BDSM and kink, also through my experience as a body worker and doing massage therapy, I've actually found that for me, a lot of BDSM spaces that involve impact, rope, electrical play, caning, flogging, different sensation play with types of tickling, that most of those I actually relate to a form of body work rather than them having to be about sex. So just to add a little bit of clarity in there on why there may be the delineation, because I know a lot of people can get those things wrapped up that like if you're playing in BDSM and kink spaces that there's sex involved and there isn't always. It really just depends on the agreements between the partners. Again, what their limits are for those spaces. Side note, those limits can change as well. And I will say the hard limits are probably less likely to change. And at least, again, in my experience, the soft limits can change. One, again, with that information gathering that I highly recommend doing if you are finding your interest peaked around one of your soft limits and wanting to explore it, whether that is because you want to explore it for yourself or you have a partner who's like, I'm really interested in this and you're noticing some resistance. Um, but like that can also change based on the trust you have developed in a relationship. And this can go both ways. So let's say that there was a break in trust somewhere in your relationship. And so something in your body does not feel as safe in those play spaces with a partner, then it may be that your limits actually can go back up a step or two. And you need more slowness before getting into like a heavy impact scene or whatever that looks like for you. That is perfectly normal and that is perfectly okay. Like you are the You are the absolute guardian. You are the absolute caretaker for your system, for your limits, for your boundaries. And if somebody else is wanting to step over those or keep pushing past those, ultimately it is your job to take the action to say, I'm not doing this anymore, to step away, to do whatever it is that works for you. For me, a lot of the time, that's making the choice to step back a little bit from the relationship, from whatever the experience is, so I can gain perspective around what's going on, what's coming up in my system. That being said, I do want to give you all access to a really phenomenal resource that I created. I call it the BDSM checklist, and it is really just a very intensive list of a wide variety of BDSM and kink play. And this is laid out through a spreadsheet so you can go in and mark under one column like your level of experience with it. So if you're like kind of new to it, if you have a lot of experience, if you have no experience, there's a whole nother column so you can say what your interest level is with each of these things. The beautiful thing about a checklist like this is more than likely you're going to come across things that you have done and you have tons of experience with. You're going to come across things that you have not done and but you've like heard of. Maybe they've piqued your interest. Maybe it's kind of had the like, I don't know factor to it. You're going to come across things that you've probably never heard of. And all of that is okay. Like it is literally just this document that is for your use only. You never have to share it with anyone unless you decide to, where you can kind of get a clearer image of what sorts of things pique your interest in what you're wanting to explore. Also, the things that, again, are more of those hard and soft limits for yourself. Again, it's brainstorming, it's learning about you at your core. And again, those things will change. So you can keep coming back to this resource, right? Let's say you're fairly new to the world of BDSM and kink, and like you first go through this list and you're like 95% of it is a like no or a hard no or a soft limit. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then in a year, 2 years, 5 years, you've gained more experience and you're like, "Oh, I wonder what that looks like for me now." Well, go back and redo it. Check it again because it is likely that things have shifted and changed. That is the one constant that we have in our lives is that things will constantly change, right? Things will constantly shift, and that's in who you are, the expression of your sexuality, the expression of your being, in what interests you, what you want to explore, what you want to achieve. So definitely like it's a tool you can come back to over and over again. So just know it's there for you. I will create a link for it down in the description under the YouTube video, and then you can go make a copy of it for yourself and just keep it for your use. Let's see what else in hard and soft limits. So we went over like what the difference between hard and soft limits are. Um, that your limits, your boundaries are yours to really hold and maintain. Like you sharing those with another person is a kindness. Again, it's not something you ever owe them. Um, but like, especially in BDSM dynamics, like if you have a hard limit of like, I never want to experience anything with my anus, nothing anal, like nothing's going inside me, nothing's even touching around that area on my body. Like that limit is perfectly respectable. It is not something you ever have to push. Uh, if somebody does try to push it, that's a hard no and a hard stop in my book, right off the bat. The only time to me that a no in BDSM, normal sexual relationships, or anything else is not a no is if there are predefined agreements that a no is not a no, and that's when you have safe words. And so let's touch a little bit on safe words. Uh, a lot of the text I've come across in the realm of BDSM and even being out in public play spaces, again, dungeons, kink events, kink parties, a lot of those spaces will use a standard scale of green, yellow, and red. Green being that the person is being okay, yellow being that they need to slow down or that it needs to not get any more intense than the level it's at right now, and red being a hard stop. And that may mean that the scene comes to a complete stop or that the person just really needs everything that's going on right now to stop and maybe it can pick up later, but that is a break point, more heavy check-ins, possibly some aftercare, and figuring out like, do we proceed from here? I definitely recommend if there is any potential of like your no or stop not being taken seriously, or like that being a space where like the person isn't taking that as a stop sign, then use safe words 100%. Like, and if a person's like, oh, I don't want to use safe words, and they don't want the words no and stop to apply to a scene, then it may be a good space to just take a step away from. And this is from some personal experience where I had a dom where they wouldn't always hear my no, and they they were being kind of like sketchy on establishing safe words. They were wanting phrases that would likely amplify their sexual desire and encourage them to keep going as a safe word. Like, oh, go harder. Like, and I don't recommend using common like phrasing or words you would use during a sexual play space either as your safe words, because then that can get confusing, or it can also reduce their impact and value for people, and that just comes down to animal psychology and human psychology as far as it doesn't end up becoming something that's taken very seriously. And when you're calling a stop, it is serious, right? It means that you are no longer enjoying whatever it is that's happening. And that's even if you're playing with pain, like I definitely recommend like make sure you're enjoying the space you're getting to experience with the partner. And even if let's say you get through a pain scene or something that's really getting into heavy emotional or mental spaces like with degradation, humiliation, um, give yourself the space afterwards, one for aftercare, but to really have some conversations about what came up for you in that space, what you were getting to explore. Another thing I have seen referenced, um, probably over the last several years, is the idea of DOMs having hard and soft limits. Just like subs get hard and soft limits, DOMs get their own hard and soft limits. Like you are the leader of that space, and that doesn't mean that you just have to explore that space because your submissive partner really wants to experience it. Again, if it's something that they want to experience and there's more of that soft limit edge to you, have conversations with them, do research, find mentors, educators, coaches to help lead you through that space. Classes. Again, there is a huge plethora of resources available. It's just finding what really works for you. But you also get your hard and soft limits. One thing I do want to point out, and this is, again, my own personal experience as a submissive, I was having some regular, consistent play where it was more pain spaces. It was bringing up harder emotions and or like painful sensations in my body. Well, in these spaces, I would end up, or my Dom would end up getting to a point where he would call a scene. And these weren't necessarily points that I was nonverbal by any means. And the thing I found very interesting is he would tell me that he called the scene because it didn't seem like I could take any more or that it was too uncomfortable for me. And I actually noticed this sort of like flare that happened in my system because I didn't actually agree based on my own experience with those spaces, things I have moved through before. I was like, that actually wasn't my limit, and you're telling me it was my limit. So the the takeaway from this is yes, while I have my own limits, my Dom also had his limits. And him calling the scene in that situation came down more to he didn't feel comfortable proceeding any further. And there's nothing wrong with that. My invitation here is to own your own limits. As a dom, as a sub, if you need to end a scene, that's okay. Take your ownership, like hold on to your power and don't just give it over to the other person by saying that you had to end the scene because it was about them, right? There's a lot that comes down to relationship communication, projection, modeling that has happened in the world. But ultimately, like my Dom calling that scene had more to do with where he was at than where I was actually at. And again, it's just acknowledging like this is where I'm at within my own limits. Because for me as a sub and just as a coach and a lot of the work I've done, especially around emotional spaces and playing with my own pain, like I knew that I could go into many more depths. And even if somebody else wasn't providing aftercare for me, that I can also be with myself through those depths and pull myself out the other side. In this situation, again, I was being told it was because of my limits, which I had not called. And when it was more about how comfortable he felt holding that space in the moment. So again, it's a little insight again to hold on to your own ownership because when you put it off as this other person seemed really uncomfortable, you're also not acknowledging what came up for you in your system. And this is one of those points where you're taking away from your own power, from your own sovereignty. You're kind of dismissing a point of like, where am I where am I at? And like how much do I feel I can hold? Again, there's nothing wrong with a top or with a submissive not wanting to hold past a certain space and just own that in yourself. Like it can be hard at times and it is incredibly worthwhile to do and to start giving yourself that. Let's see, is there anything else kind of coming up around hard and soft limits? I honestly think that's it for today. I'm not having anything else peak. I mean, there's a lot of other conversations, a lot of other points around hard and soft limits that can be talked about and can be discussed. This call is really just a starting point to kind of get ideas percolating, to start giving you some routes to explore within yourself, because again, all hard and soft limits are within like each one of us. And when we get into relationships, those are the agreements we form in our relationship, kind of that container of a boundary for our relationship. And whether that's we're monogamous or we're poly or we're monogamish, right? That is a container, it is a boundary for your relationship. And your hard and soft limits for your personal being versus the relationship as a whole are two very different things. I guess there is one last thing I want to touch on. And again, this has been something I've come up across in a couple different conversations. I remember the first time I came across it, I remember being a little taken aback by the visceral reaction I felt in my body. And it was a conversation with another submissive where I was just asking about what their limits were like. And they looked at me and told me, I have no limits. And I remember thinking for a moment and just feeling one really confused, and the kind of visceral reaction went, "Oh no, this is not a good thing." Um, but I hadn't explored the idea of what what no limits really meant for me at that point. And this gave me the opportunity to. And what I ended up discovering for myself is that if another person genuinely, like, their answer is just, I have no limits. To me, that's that's not a very educated answer on their part, and tells me that they probably haven't done a whole lot of self-discovery into what their limits are. For me, I want partners who have limits. Like, it is a sign to me of great partners, great play partners, whether that's sexual or not, that they have limits and they can communicate those, not just do whatever and anything you like to my body, to my being, to my emotions. Again, we all have our limits. And what this just tells me is that this person or these answers, it comes from a very uneducated place, and where the person probably hasn't taken a lot of time to actually reflect on what that looks like for them. And I will say, when I started out on my BDSM and kink journey, I had, like, I knew my hard limits right off the bat. And there were so many things that, like, I had zero concept for that existed in the world of BDSM and kink, or I had different lenses and filters that gave me an ick response in my body, or um, some other resistance that told me like, yeah, I don't really know about going there. Um, but again, as I have deepened my knowledge and understanding, it gives me points of changing what that looks like for myself. And I would say that one of my biggest lens shifts in the world of BDSM and kink was actually getting away from the idea that it was all just about sex. To me, it's more about sets of sensation than having to do with anything involving sexual activity explicitly anymore, and just being in an experience. And a lot of the times in my own BDSM and kink scenes now, that does not involve any genitalia, uh, breasts, or like what would be considered the highly erogenous zones of the body. So anus, breasts, um, genitals. But again, those are yours to define for yourself because we all have our own definitions of what that looks like. And it's getting clear on what that looks like for you. Also, know that each and every other person, because of their experience, because of the definitions they've gotten, because of what was modeled in the world around them, each person is going to kind of have their own definitions as well. But just know that, like, you get to take ownership. You get to be empowered through your lens of BDSM and kink. So, like, let's have this be something that's empowering for you. And one of those first really foundational pieces comes down to these hard and soft limits. All right, again, I will post a link for the BDSM checklist down below this video in the description. Like, you are free to go make a copy of that and then just use it to your heart's content. You can do check-ins with yourself like today, and then a year from now and 5 years from now, like you can just keep that copy and update it as you go along as things shift and evolve for you. If you are interested in working with me on a one-on-one basis, I would love to have a chat with you. You can go over to my resources, which are listed in the description under this video or in the about section on YouTube, and you can book a free discovery call. You can join the Sovereign Dom email or the Sexient Beings email list, and you'll get some amazing resources sent to you completely for free just by signing up. And until next time, it was great to have everyone here. If you're open to it, then comment below. Like, what was your biggest takeaway from this call today? What what are you going to shift for yourself about the way you approach your hard and soft limits? Like, how do you want to bring this forward in your kinky lifestyle? All right, till next time.